Hello everyone, today we will learn 7.5, the third one, ISLM model of an open economy. It includes 1. The third one, ISLM FX model. 2. Macroeconomic policies in the third one. 3. Monetary policy and floating exchange rates. 4. Monetary policy and fixed exchange rates. 5. Physical policy and floating exchange rates. 6. Physical policy and fixed exchange rates. 7. Summary. 1. The third one, ISLM FX model. Figure 7-12 shows the equilibrium in the ISLM FX model. In panel A, the IS and the LM curves are both drawn. The goods and the foreign exchange markets are in equilibrium when the economy is on the S curve. The money market is in equilibrium when the economy is on the LM curve. Both markets are in equilibrium if and only if the economy is at point 1, the unique point of intersection of IS and LM. In panel B, the foreign exchange FX market is shown. The domestic return DR in the foreign exchange market equals the money market interest rate. Equilibrium is at point 1, while the foreign return FR equals domestic return I. 2. Macroeconomic policies in the third one. We focus on the two main policy actions: changes in monetary supply, implemented through changes in the money supply, and changes in physical policy involving changes in government spending or taxes. The key assumptions of this section are as follows. The economy begins in a state of long-run equilibrium. We then consider policy change in the home economy, assume that conditions in the foreign economy, that is, the rest of the world, are unchanged. The home economy is subject to the usual short-run assumption of a sticky price level at home and abroad. Furthermore, we assume that the foreign exchange market operates freely and unrestrictedly by capital controls, and that the exchange rate is determined by market forces. 3. Monetary policy and floating exchange rates. Figure 7-13 illustrates the prediction of the model. In panel A in the LM diagram, the goods and the money markets are initially in equilibrium at point 1. The interest rate in the money market is also the domestic return DR1 that prevails in the foreign exchange market. In panel B, the foreign exchange market is initially in equilibrium at point 1. A temporary monetary expansion that increases the money supply from M1 to M2 would shoot the LM curve down in panel A from LM1 to LM2, causing the interest rate to fall from I1 to I2. DR falls from DR1 to DR2. In panel B, the lower interest rate implies that the exchange rate must depreciate, rising from E1 to E2. As the interest rate falls, increasing investment I and the exchange rate depreciates, increasing the trade balance. Demand increases, which corresponds to the move down the S curve from point 1 to point 2. Output expands from Y1 to Y2. The new equilibrium corresponds to points 2 and 2. To sum up, a temporary monetary expansion and floating exchange rates is effective in combating economic downturns by boosting output. It raises output at home, lowers the interest rate, and causes a depreciation of the exchange rate. What happens to the trade balance cannot be predicted with certainty. 4. Monetary policy and fixed exchange rate. Figure 7-14 puts the model to work. In panel A, in the SLM diagram, the goods and the money markets are initially in equilibrium at point 1. In panel B, the foreign exchange market is initially in equilibrium at point 1. A temporary monetary expansion that increases the money supply from M1 to M2 would shoot the LM curve down in panel A. In panel B, the lower interest rate would imply that the exchange rate must depreciate, rising from E1 to E2. This depreciation is inconsistent with the pegged exchange rate, so the policymakers cannot move LM in this way. They must leave the money supply equal to M1 implication and a fixed exchange rate. Autonomous monetary policy is not an option. To sum up, monetary policy and fixed exchange rates is impossible to undertake. Fixing the exchange rates means giving up monetary policy autonomy. Countries cannot simultaneously allow capital mobility, maintain fixed exchange rates, and pursue an autonomous monetary policy. 5. Physical policy and floating exchange rates. Figures 7-15 shows what happens in our model. In panel A, in the SLM diagram, the goods and money markets are initially in equilibrium at point 1. The interest rate in the money market is also the domestic return, DR1, that prevails in the foreign exchange market. In panel B, the foreign exchange market is initially in equilibrium at point 1. A temporary physical expansion that increases government spending from G1 to G2 would shoot the IS curve to the right in panel A from IS1 to IS2, causing the interest rate to rise from I1 to I2. The domestic return shoots up from DR1 to DR2. In panel B, the higher interest rate would imply that the exchange rate must appreciate, falling from E1 to E2. The initial shoot in the S curve and the falling exchange rate corresponds in panel A to the movement along the M curve from point 1 to point 2. Output expands Y1 to Y2. The new equilibrium corresponds to points 2 and 2. As the interest rate rises, decreasing investment I, and the exchange rate appreciates, decreasing the trade balance. Demand falls. This impact of physical expansion is often referred to as crowding out. That is, the increase in government spending is offset by a decline in private spending. Thus, in an open economy, physical expansion crowds out investment by raising the interest rate and decreases net exports by causing the exchange rate to appreciate. Over time, it limits the rise in output to less than the increase in government spending. To sum up, an expansion of fiscal policy and the floating exchange rate might be temporarily effective. It raises output at home, raises the interest rate, causes an appreciation of the exchange rate, and decreases the trade balance. It indirectly leads to crowding out of investment and exports, and thus limits the rise in output to less than an increase in government spending. A temporary contraction of fiscal policy has opposite effects. 6. Fiscal policy and fixed exchange rates. Figure 7-16 shows what happens in this case. In panel A, in the SLM diagram, the goods and money markets are initially in equilibrium at point 1. The interest rate in the money market is also the domestic return, DR1, that prevails in the foreign exchange market. In panel B, the foreign exchange market is initially in equilibrium at point 1. A temporary physical expansion on its on increases government spending from G1 to G2 and would shift the S curve to the right in panel A from S1 to S2, causing the interest rate to rise from I1 to I2. The domestic return would then rise from DR1 to DR2. In panel B, the higher interest rate would imply the exchange rate must appreciate, falling from E1 to E2. To maintain the peg, the monetary authority must now intervene, shifting the LM curve down from LM1 to LM2. The fiscal expansion thus prompts a monetary expansion. In the end, the interest rate and the exchange rate are left unchanged, and the output expands dramatically from Y1 to Y2. The new equilibrium is at points 2 and 2. To sum up, a temporary expansion of fiscal policy and the fixed exchange rates raises output at home by a considerable amount. The case of a temporary contraction of fiscal policy would have similar but opposite effects. 7. Summary. In this table, an up arrow indicates that the variable rises, a down arrow indicates that the variables falls, and the 0 indicates no effect. The effects would be reversed for contractionary policies. The law of zeros for monetary expansion and fixed rates reflects the fact that this infeasible policy cannot be undertaken. In a floating exchange rate regime, autonomous monetary and fiscal policy is feasible. The power of monetary policy to expand demand comes from two forces in the short run. Lower interest rates boost investment, and the depreciated exchange rate boosts the trade balance, all else equal. In the end, though, the trade balance will experience downward pressure from an import rise due to the increase in home output and income. The net effect on output and investment is positive, and the net effect on the trade balance is unclear. But in practice, it too is likely to be positive. Expansion and fiscal policy is also effective under floating regime, even though the impact of actual spending is offset by crowding out in two areas. Investment is crowded out by higher interest rates, and the trade balance is crowded out by an appreciated exchange rate. Thus, on net, investment falls and the trade balance also falls, and the latter effect is ambiguously amplified by additional import demand arising from increased home output. In a fixed exchange rate regime, monetary policy loses its power for two reasons. First, interest parity implies that the domestic interest rate cannot move independently of the foreign rate, so investment demand cannot be manipulated. Second, the peg means that there can be no movement in the exchange rate, so the trade balance cannot be manipulated by expenditure switching. On the fiscal policy is feasible under fixed regime. Tax cuts or spending increases by the government can generate additional demand, but fiscal expansion then requires a monetary expansion to keep interest rates steady and maintain the peg. Fiscal policy becomes ultra powerful in a fixed exchange rate setting. The reason for this is that if interest rates and exchange rates are held steady by the central bank, investment and the trade balance are never crowded out by fiscal policy. Monetary policy follows fiscal policy, and amplifies it. Thank you